So at least for today's demonstration, Professor Bosov has asked me to go over two things. So essentially, he wants to make sure that you guys know how to make a 1 to 200, which I think is pretty simple. We've definitely done that before, but just in case you need the review, we're prepared to do that. Secondly, he's asked, well, a little bit of what he's going to give you today is obviously some sort of precedent study. You guys know at least more or less what he kind of likes to do with that. Obviously finding something a little bit similar in scale, in shape, and style, and maybe possibly for the environment. And in some cases, actually analyze also the precedent, right? Not so much just the site analysis. However, glad to see some of you guys already took the weekend to dive into that site analysis I gave you, and are already getting some comments and feedback on that stuff. However, I did want to cover those two things, but also I noticed the first Sketchpad assignment was abysmal, right? And this was the daily one, right? The every other day. Don't get me wrong, I think a lot of us kind of fell off after spring break, and that's okay, right? I'm kind of playing it by ear, and to be fair, you guys have a lot on your shoulders, right? I mean, studio can be quite the burden, right? However, that doesn't mean that graphics falls by the wayside. In fact, for some, their grades are still really high, right? Because, well, they're doing just fine in graphics. They're turning everything in. And you guys may have seen that I just give you 100 if it's turned in, and of course a 0 if it's not, right? However, at least for the sake of cures, bless you, we can turn some things in late. However, I'm giving us assignment Sketchpad 2, right? Or assignment with the iPad 2. This will essentially be due this Friday. And it makes a lot of sense because you're going to be studying precedents anyway. So I'll cover that. However, first, just in case you can't make a 1 to 200, right, we can go to our site. I'm not going to fully, actually completely do it, but let's get close to our site somewhere. Actually, I'm in the wrong city. Whoops, we're in Austin. But if we go down to our site, man, you can see this thing from forever. Anyway, you'll want to make a 200 line measurement, right? Whether you do this in Google Earth Pro like I'm doing right now, or if you do it on just regular Google Earth. To be fair, I don't think Google Maps, those are kind of two separate entities now. I don't think you could do a measurement in Google Maps, but you might be able to. Worth a shot. Anyway, we'll go to our measurement tool. And if we're trying to make a 1 to 200, you'll want a 200-foot marker, right? Of course, you'll make sure that it's in feet. Click, and basically slide as much as possible. Just in case I've never said this, you probably should do this in a sort of top view, but fake it till you make it. Of course, the straighter that it is on the image and the screenshot that we take eventually, the easier it is to make that be exactly an inch, right? So of course, 200 feet is pretty large, at least compared to our site. Get it pretty close. 199, 199.75. Oh man, well technically 200.55 is closer, or wait, that's technically closer, right? So we'll go with that one. Oh wait, 99.69? Anyway, as you can see, it kind of varies with the topography of that measurement. Of course, I'll save it, line measure, and I typically actually put the indication of the feet measurement that I took. Now, I'd imagine what he's gonna do for you guys is actually a pretty big map, right? Probably wants to see the local areas, probably in like a 1 mile radius, a 5 mile radius. In fact, it would make a lot of sense that you potentially look at where this produce is actually coming from locally, right? That could be a really interesting map where maybe this actually gets a lot bigger and there's actually these huge radius of 50 miles from our location, 100 miles from our location. If some of you guys are familiar with HEB, they actually have a lot of restrictions on where they get their meat and their produce. It only actually comes from local things, right? They do buy some of that stuff. Anyway, I'm not trying to get into HEB here. But some companies actually are really stringent about these rules. And to be fair, you could probably look at HEB architects or even give them a call. Hey, do you have any like maps of the produce you guys get for HEB? I give you this hint because I know these maps exist. And it would be definitely in your interest, right? That we have somebody delegate that and share with the whole class. That's just kind of my forte. If Caden finds it, well, hopefully he'll share with the whole class, right? Anyway, I'd imagine that's what the assignment is going to be, at least about today, or at least what he's hinted at. So I did want to show that, if I'm trying to make that an inch, right, or make this 1 to 200, I'm essentially going to take a screenshot and make sure that that measurement is in that screenshot. I mean, that's obviously key, important. But realistically, I mean, we're talking a huge swath of area here, right? And essentially we'll take that image, of course, put it in Illustrator. We'll do a new file. And in our case, I think he wants it 11 by 17. So we'll go with 17 by 11. One artboard. Sweet. And we'll essentially put that image inside. That's not the right image. Where do all my screenshots go? Downloads. There they are. There it is. Obviously, we'll place it onto our 11 by 17. And even though it fits and it's great and all, we will still need to do Command R or Control R if you're in Windows and make an inch, right? Of course, using our guidelines, we can make exactly an inch. And as you can see, I got a lot more than I needed. And that's good because I kind of wanted to cut outside the page anyway. All right, definitely got too big of a swath, but that's okay. Better to have too much than too little, I suppose. Zoom out a little bit. But again, just getting that red line. Of course, holding shift to make sure that it stays proportional. That is key too. I can't tell you how many times that accidentally goes by the wayside. Oh man, I made it too big. Fake it till you make it, right? Again, holding shift to make sure that stays proportional. And voila, turn it into a PDF. I have a 1 to 200, 11 by 17. Again, I know most of that is probably recap for us, but just in case you needed that recap, right? Second thing is, of course, a precedent study, which maybe leads into the iPad assignment itself. But if I know Bosoff, and I've worked with him a while, and he was my professor as well, guys, right? So a lot of what I teach actually comes from that as well. And I just wanted to share this because I don't know, back in the day when we were taught this stuff, they kind of just gave us one image and kind of explained it, right? You took a bunch of notes and you just kind of prayed for the best. And to be fair, even internet research was, not compared to like ChatGPT, where I can like literally ask it a very specific question, and it generates a search that way. It's almost like Google's becoming obsolete, and I was really waiting for that day a long time. You know what I mean? People are going to say Google it. People are going to say ChatGPT it. I don't know. It doesn't ring off the tongue as well. But anyway, one of my favorite sites is, of course, Pinterest, and it's because of its large index of pictures. But if you type in architecture precedent analysis, you'll actually get a lot of the old school stuff that we used to look at. And I did want to share that, at least for the sake of recording, because I will say, as much as it is important to look at precedents and understand their styles and what they used, how they got it accomplished, things like that, a story, maybe even the concept that starts to be involved with the idea, and maybe how that can apply to the community of this produce competition that you're doing. However, it's okay to also start simple, right? And to be fair, what I like and appreciate about these diagrams is that they far often look more like partie drawings of certain aspects of the precedent itself. So essentially what I'd like you to do for our iPad assignment is the precedent that you pick, and I imagine that he already gave you this assignment, right? Like in terms of go find a precedent last Friday. Great. So you should at least have one, and if you don't, get one, right? Because of course you need it for this project. However, what I'll be asking you to do, and it may, what I'm saying is correlate with what he's gonna ask you to do, but I would like you to find the structure of your building. So find that grid system in your building. And that could be really simple. I just make a layer in the iPad, I call it structure, and I simply just dot and make a diagram from these patterns. To be fair, some of you guys are getting actually really good at this stuff, right? In terms of using the iPad, some of y'all's drawings are incorporating it as well, kind of doing these hybrids between iPad and Illustrator, and really just all the line work, and it's really coming about. Not to put Kale on a pedestal, but I got to share some of his drawings with the Cures department in the government, and they were flabbergasted. They were like, "Where's the rest of the class, right? My question too, right? So I'm really kind of rooting for you guys to implicate these, right? I can only fib so much, right? I can be like, yeah, that was made on an iPad. There's only so much someone's actually going to believe you, right? However, I've also shown them your previous drawings and really the school body's work, right? So they're seeing how this analog and this digital really compares to each other. And I think you owe it to yourself, being literally the young professionals that you are. This is a great opportunity for your data to actually be involved and actually inspire change. So again, I want to reiterate some of those things. But again, what I'm asking for in terms of these layers are actually pretty simple, right? Notice how they all have nice line weight, right? There's definitely an indication between dark and light, and even some line types, right? Such as center lines, main axes. However, different categories such as structure, we have, additive and subtraction. So looking at the masses in the second, what do we have there? Let me actually just use my computer. So at least in this case, they actually chose the categories, but I'm going to throw some out there actually as we look at these diagrams, right? Obviously the ones I've already shown is the original, the structure. So looking at these three precedents, so notice at least in this diagram, there's three different precedents actually being shown at the top. Then they study their structure. Notice how it's a simplification of the structure. It's no more complex than the actual precedent, revealing some of the relationships of what is actually going on in the project. Very often we just look at the story, we just look at the scale, we look at the size, the cost of these precedents, and we don't really actually draw on them and study their floor plans and their sections in a more detailed way. I'd imagine some of you guys have maybe even done this before. It's done in freehand too sometimes. It's honestly done in my graphics 3 class sometimes. How many of you guys have ever done an overlay of a precedent? So it shouldn't be absolutely foreign, is what I'm saying, right? But I can't express this enough that if you practice this enough, you can look at any floor plan and just your mind's eye will start to see these relationships. And that's definitely key. That's a key skill you definitely want to have, is to be able to look at something and know how it's composed or comprised, right? So obviously studying the masses in the second row. Let's see what this one is. Can you guys read that? I can't read that. Balance. Okay. Symmetry and balance, definitely something to maybe look at. Parts, yeah, could definitely study its parts. And then finally, they have like a little perspective of a key moment in the building. Again, a really great precedent analysis. And to be fair, this is 3 of them. I'm only asking you for 1, and I imagine that Professor Bosov's only going to be asking for 1 as well. Let's take a look at another. This one's a little bit more old school. This is definitely what Bohuslav Escamilla showed me and Alex Gonzalez showed me when I was in Graphics 1 and Graphics 2. Yes, in Graphics 1 and Graphics 2, we just looked at precedents. In fact, we had to make and like draft an entire Villa Savoye, and we had to put it on this gigantic piece of recycled paper. I'll bring him out if I ever run into him again. You may have actually seen him before. We used to hang him up at the old CAC building. However, there's some similar relationships being studied. Structure. Right, this is of course for the Farnsworth house, a very simple house, right? Very often what's hard is to try and keep these diagrams simple when of course the architecture like Farnsworth house is very simple, right? Circulation, right? The use as a unit of whole, okay, that's pretty interesting. Additive and subtractive, there's that relationship again. Hierarchy, oh yeah, there's a design 1 principle. Structure and balance, yep, definitely key. Plan and section, yeah, definitely. And clearly just geometry. Let's take a look at another. Actually, these 3 were pretty good as well. This is, of course, the, not Villa Savoye, Ronchamp by Le Corbusier, found in the middle of nowhere, Switzerland. Did I tell you the story about this one, guys? That I went all the way to this place? Like, first I took a 6-hour train, and then I took a 2-hour bus, and this building was closed. It's a church, right? And go figure, I go on a Sunday and it's closed. But again, we start to actually study the really complex organic forms of Le Corbusier. How many of you guys are familiar with Ronchamp? Seen it before, I'm sure, right? How many of you know how many curves it has? Well, you would if you ever take the floor plan and just start to trace it. Again, we're trying to train our minds and our hands here to understand really large relationships that are often maybe even only viewed for 2 seconds and nobody really even understands them or why it happens or why it's useful. When you're being asked to understand and design something for people who don't understand it, right? So again, to take the successes, take the failures that you see in these architectural pieces and build upon them. In fact, they say that good designers don't create things, right? The best designers actually steal ideas and make them better, right? Anyway, I know I've said that before, but just to reiterate. Of course, we have another precedent. Obviously, studying more of the symmetricalness, the different parts and characters of these pieces. Again, these can look really nice. They can get a little bit small on that final board, right? That especially, I can't tell you how many times people use a precedent picture to kind of show that they studied something. Instead of using that precedent picture, use your own diagrams. Wow. This student actually studied the precedent, and now I can see actually how they used it in their project. That's key. That's what decides the first and the second place winner. Stuff like that, which I'm sure you guys even got into a little bit last Friday with your competition, right? Did you guys have any of those talks where they were kind of going back and forth between one or two of them? Well, this one does this. Well, this one does that. But look at the precedent. They both use precedents, and this one, I dare think that they know their precedent a little bit better and that they actually implicated it better in their project. Again, this was what starts to tip the scale, if you will, when it comes to the decisions of juries. Anyway, just to kind of throw that out there. Let's get into the iPad and just cover it real quick, just in case you don't know where to start. And let's get this screen shared. Man, that's so cool. All right, so we're on the iPad, and hopefully my image has already loaded. So essentially, the way that we're going to use it, at least for this program, and to be fair, this will get a lot easier on the Wacom, and something with what you're more familiar with, such as like Photoshop, right? And when in doubt, you can use a mouse, whereas to be fair, sometimes in the iPad, you can if you have it as a dual screen, but to be fair, sometimes that mouse is a good crutch to have at first, which is why you need to practice this with this wonderful pen, right? Anyway, first things first, let's get the image in there. So I'm going to go to the top, add my image. In my case, it's probably in my files. I'll go to my desktop. Hopefully it's already loaded. If not, I might just use the floor plan that I used from last time. Ah, man. Gotta love the school internet. Doesn't really upload your file as necessary. However, that's okay. I'll work with something at least familiar. From Sketchpad assignment 1, right? And that actually might be great for the tutorial because, well, to be fair, we're all going to have different precedents anyway. So, but essentially we want to get the image on the page first. And what I mean, guys, is to simplify the building, right? So for an example, I'll add a layer, and you can actually label these layers as well. So actually, I think I did get it correctly set. Let's do structure. Ah, man, I didn't get it set. You can actually write in stuff to do the text, but it does take some practice. However, show my keyboard. It has a little iPad or iPhone keyboard, which is adorable and hard to use. But let's go ahead and label this one structure. So again, what's nice about, I learned about these file types as well, is if you save them to your desktop on your iCloud here or your Google Drive, you can open them up in Photoshop with all the layers. This is a game changer, guys. I would have wished for this technology 10 years ago. It would have saved me hours. I'm gonna look back in my life now on my deathbed and go, man, I really wish I didn't spend those 500 hours scanning shit. Anyway, there's a reason why we use this technology and we use it in architecture is because very often our time is like super critical. Have you guys ever noticed during a project you just run out of time every single time? Sometimes it's because of the computer, right? So again, the more knowledgeable that we can get with this stuff, honestly, the more time we can have for the things that we have outside of architecture, to say the very least. And I don't know, once I got out of school, I realized that pretty quickly, that Not everything has to be drafted, but everything does have to be beautiful. Anyway, we can label a structure. Let's go ahead and look at that. One thing I've noticed that maybe some people aren't doing is you can actually change the opacity of the image itself. I'm noticing in a lot of our sketches that they're extremely saturated, like they're just overbearing with color. You don't have to overbear this with color, and I would say get really used to actually drawing in 50% or even 25%. It often looks a little bit better and mimics, you know, the pencil and the pen, at least on the iPad, a lot better. To be fair, on the Wacom, I still use about 75% color. But some of you guys are just like dousing it with, you know, 100%. So first things first, and I probably want some straight lines in this, so I'm gonna have to enact my rulers and things like that. Which again, arguably is a lot easier on the Wacom. It just has a button, and you literally get pretty used to drawing straight lines. Anyway, I can't wait to show you guys, as you can hear in the excitement of my voice. But let's get a regular gray, and let's find some structure here. And in our case, this one's actually kind of nice. It shows both the section and the plan at the exact same time. And I'll make sure that I'm in my structure layer and really just start to indicate something. So for instance, I'm going to simplify it and go, well, I don't know. I don't want to access line. Maybe I actually want to show some sort of center line. So long dash, short dash, long dash, short dash. So again, just kind of a rough sketch. These don't have to be absolutely phenomenal. They're practice. Maybe we use them actually for studio, but that'll be up to you. We can also use the ruler in this case, right? So right up here, you can get that a little bit more anatomically correct, if you will. But to be fair, I don't know, this is a lot faster for me, and I'm good at Rhino, right? But to be fair, I mean, just simply drawing it, moving my lines, and understanding the structure, I don't know. I wish my iPad was a little bit bigger, and I'm sure you guys probably wish the same. You're all looking at Liz like, man, I gotta get one of those, right? But definitely real estate space of the amount of screen does make a huge difference. And I think when you guys actually see it next week and this screen gets literally 6 times bigger, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, I can see the potential now, right? Especially of these digital screens. But as you can see, we're just simplifying it, right? Using the ruler, making it as sketchy as possible, really. I like to have my human character in there at really all costs. But really just kind of getting the basic structure, the basic outline. And as you can see in the floor plan, it does change quite a bit here. So don't want to get my image. But I'm seeing some indications of changes in the structure here and there. So again, this is probably a level of detail that you don't normally focus on with the precedent itself. Really understanding the floor plan and what's happening, understanding what those rooms are doing and why they're located to each other can make the difference of why you not only chose it, but why it was successful to society. Hopefully I'm making some sense, guys. Not trying to preach too much or make this an extremely long video, but hopefully you can actually see the potential of using these lines. And I'm pretty sure you can actually put these together, just in case you mess up just like I did. I wonder if I can actually put it in there. It was worth a shot. Doesn't look like it's the case, but as you know, you can save this as a PSD file, and you could fix something like that in Photoshop anyway. However, going on to my next layer, so maybe I turn those off. Maybe I look at circulation, and for that, maybe I actually want to get something more of like a straight edge marker. All right. Maybe I want to use a different color. Maybe I have a favorite accent color like red. But instead of using pure red, I go for a 50%. This is what I mean, guys. Not only in opacity, but the actual color. It's still red, but it's 50% red. And to be fair, I could even still add the amount of flow to that as well. You'll see if you actually click on the pen itself, you can have some further options into that as well. Or the layer itself, right? Just simply putting that down to a 50%. Anyway, just kind of want to throw that out there. I'm not going to use my ruler for this one. I just kind of want to indicate that. That's it. I want to show that you can go from here, from outside, go through the kitchen. I don't know, maybe that's all I have, right? The background of my image along with some sort of circulation arrow. That, it could be simple, right? But again, it starts to just go circulation. I don't know about you, but I can write a lot faster than I can type, or make a text box and do all those different little things. And again, I could further actually edit it in Photoshop, which is pretty nice. But again, the color's not too saturated. You guys notice about the arrow? It kind of looks a little human. It almost looks like a real marker. Well, that's just because I put it to 50%, not only in color, but also opacity. And you don't read it as pink, do you? You read it as red, because it's red, right? But lately I've been seeing some people's drawings like super intense. And to be fair, this is at 50% as well. So it's more like this, right? And it really actually competes with the architecture and the lines. And it's almost like, what are you're yelling at me, right? Instead of actually just showing me a simple principle. And it's not a jab at anybody. It's really not. I did the exact same thing. And trust me, you won't be the last student who does it either, right? But some of the things that people ask when you go to another college, they're like, why are you so good? And it's because you actually focused on the details of what your professors were telling you. Because guys, I have a lot of experience in drawing. I really do. I mean, and I'd love to share that with you. And what I found along the way was that my preconceived notions about color and things and the way that I thought that I was communicating them were often way too loud, right? And actually overbearing to the thing and the relationships that I was actually trying to show. Anyway, just throwing that out there. But no, it's not a slight at anybody at all. And in fact, in my case, it looks like I still need a little bit more shown. So I don't know, maybe I actually want to show the structure in relation to that. So I still could. And again, maybe that's a layer in itself. Not too shabby. Next layer, turn that one off. Move on to the next thing, right? So on and so forth. We want to get all those different principles. I mean, even if you were just looking at like grids, right? I don't know, maybe I use a red color again, 50% right in the middle, and of course about 50% in opacity. And maybe I just look at the structures, right? So just filling in, maybe I don't need a marker for that. Let's use something a little bit more easy to use. Maybe you even start to notice that there's another relationship going on within your architecture. Something that you can learn from or implicate. I don't know, there's just something a little bit more intuitive of just drawing right on it. Especially when it comes to teaching the mind. Maybe a little bit bigger there. Or maybe I get some structure involved. Maybe show the load-bearing walls in some way. And again, I probably won't have necessarily the same grid and section. And to be fair, it doesn't really show some of that information. But I may make it up myself. There's definitely 2 ridge beams there. There's definitely structure here. Maybe I get a little bit more detailed. I start to add the foundations. I mean, what's happening when I draw these foundations, guys? Am I teaching myself a little bit about how far some of this structure should go down and the way that its footing looks? Oh, or the fact that it's called a footing. See what I'm saying? In fact, you'll be surprised, especially in your academic careers, guys, how much you actually teach yourself these things, not your professors. And if I haven't said it yet, you often learn far more from your peers and yourself than you ever will your professors. And that's not even a slight to me, that's just It's just the way higher education will go. Very often you'll see that things stop where they are, and very often you'll realize why somebody is maybe even stopped where they are when they're teaching you. I mean, for instance, have you ever noticed all the business majors? Some of them have their own successful companies, but most of them are unsuccessful companies. So why would you have them teach it? Well, because they know the mistakes that will be made, right? Learn from the mistakes. Learn from my mistakes, because it'll often make you learn from each other's mistakes, right? Learn from your own mistakes. You'll often be a lot better. In fact, I know I've said this before, but the secret to success is not working hard at your job or what you need to do, but working on yourself. And sometimes for some, it is a lot harder of a challenge, right? Is to really kick back, reflect, and look at yourself and go, where can I do better? And very often, some people don't even want to ask themselves that. I'm not trying to make it a spiritual conversation, but to be fair, it is what made me better, is myself. Bohuslav didn't take me to his side and he goes, look, you need to shape up, right? That never happened, right? But you take your life into your own hands, right? You make your own luck. And to be fair, look at that. We've already got another piece. We can label it. I'm going to go with grid. Oh, I'm going to use a better pen. And maybe a marker. Bam. Grid. And maybe I get the overlay in there. Not too shabby. But I imagine you're going to have a much bigger floor plan to work with. So again, the idea of simplification will become handy. But just to recap, guys, we went over a couple things here. I know I made it longer than it needs to be. But just to recap, we went over essentially that 1 to 200. Right? In Illustrator. We went over some of the precedent stuff, right? Such as the different diagrams and relationships that we can study. And then, of course, we actually went into the iPad. That way you can at least see some of those layers in action. Realistically speaking, you can actually export this, right? Share, export, right? And look at that, PSD as a Photoshop document file. You can open it literally right up in Photoshop. And so even if you messed up, even if you didn't like the color, you can still change it, and you don't have to do it in this program even. So I think that is quite a game changer, to say the very least. I won't necessarily go over that today, but ask me if you do have specific questions. Anyway, hopefully helpful. Sweet. Let's get to it.